Okay, so thanks everyone for joining us today. Today we're here to talk about what you as fair organizers are doing in light of this pandemic, what you've been thinking about. We have some guiding questions, and we'll probably go a bit off track, I'm sure, as we always do, but it's always good conversation. So I'm going to go through some instructions and some guidelines and what CAFE is doing. But quickly before I do that, I'm just going to let you know that we have Jeff Strickland of the PNE, Pacific National Exhibition, with us today, and he'll be moderating the conversation. So thanks, Jeff, for joining us. Perfect. Okay, so just a few guidelines. First of all, we're muting everyone's lines. If your line is unmuted right now, please do mute it. Just to prevent background noises. If you're on your phone, you can unmute your line by pressing *6. This conversation is being recorded. And it will be available online afterwards. So if you don't want to be recorded, please remove yourself from the call. As well, if you do have anonymous or confidential questions you'd like to bring up, feel free to message me privately in the chat box, and I can bring those up for you. We also ask that you raise your hand to speak. You can do that by on the middle bar. If you click participants, then you'll see a screen pop up on usually the right-hand side, and you'll see a raise hand button there. And then we have, if you prefer, you can enter chat questions into the chat box, either to everyone or to me directly. Et si vous avez des questions en français, nous sommes bilingues et nous pouvons faire la traduction. So if you'd like to have a question in French, please feel free to communicate that way as well. We can muddle through that. So some of the things that CAFE has been working on behind the scenes during this pandemic, we've launched this series of webinars. So we've started with roundtable webinar discussions to learn from each other, networking, brainstorming. I encourage you to visit our website, canadianfairs.ca/webinars, to see some upcoming webinars. There's some really good ones about scenario planning, how to go through the different scenarios for your organization, communications and outreach, virtual fundraising, some really good stuff, and that will be updated regularly. We did send out a survey, and we thank all the provincial associations for helping us send out this survey to get some feedback on the economic impact and the impact on your organization. We since have been using that actively with government advocacy, and the numbers are truly, truly staggering. I can tell you, for every dollar your organization, your Ag Society earns, on average, you put about $4.54 into the community. So almost 5 times the impact, which is really, really great. And so we put together an infographic with the survey results. If you didn't see that, you can reach out to me and I can share it with you. And then we may have some surveys coming up in the future as well. So please, please continue to check your emails and help us fill those out, because the more people fill it out, the better, the more accurate the numbers are and the larger the impact. We've just launched a communications campaign. Phase 1 of 3 probably is the #FairShareCanada, which is where we want everyone to share what you're doing in your communities during this pandemic as an organization, as an individual, as a business, to support your communities. We've heard stories about people building campers, about venues, setting up as hospitals, about people donating dog food, all sorts of stuff. So if you have those stories, please share with us using the #FairShareCanada, and we'll make sure to share it. I spoke a bit about government relations and advocacy. This is a really difficult time for everyone. We understand that, and the financial burdens are unreal. We may talk about some of the government guidelines today and some of the measures that have been announced, but we do also understand that the measures aren't necessarily the right fit for you guys. And so we are continually advocating for the interests of our industry. And then we're also looking into what we can do post-pandemic, because the face of mass gatherings is going to change and we need to be prepared for that. So you'll see some webinars about that as well as resources being developed in the future. So there's my spiel. Again, a reminder, if you have any questions throughout, this is a conversation, so please raise your hands or type it in the chat box and we will unmute you as we go along. But now I am going to hand it over to Jeff. Jeff, are you there?
I am here. Thank you, Christina. Yeah, welcome everybody. It's good to see a lot of familiar faces. Before we jump into this, I would like to start off by recognizing and thanking Christina and CAFE for working tirelessly and behind the scenes and helping us navigate through the storm. Our best practice, or our best defense, I should say, and our best offense really is going to be coming from all the information that is moving so rapidly and changing. So like many of you, we're just gathering as much information in real time as we possibly can to be making those informed decisions, which are still incredibly difficult with, of course, all the information that we have at the given time. I have been speaking with a number of you over the past weeks, and I'm glad we were able to put this together. And for our industry, you know, we're without, it doesn't need to, it goes without saying, we are experiencing unprecedented challenges right now. We are all experiencing this together across our great country, but some fairs have already canceled, some have postponed, and some of us remain in a holding pattern as we are exploring every possible scenario. You know, I can tell you on this side, we're looking at different models of what the fair may look like if it were to go ahead in August. Just chatting with Mike in New Brunswick this morning, and we're all on the same page here. And geographically, we're so separated, but we're very close. And that's why we're having this call today, is just to share some ideas and some practices, or any sort of brilliant ideas that may be out there that could benefit us all, because the more we can benefit as an industry, it's better for everyone. So today, at the very least, is really about making connections, making introductions, seeing who's on the other side of the country, perhaps in the same boat as you, sharing ideas and supports. We don't compete with each other as an industry necessarily, and fairs have always improved by kind of stealing each other's ideas and making all our fairs better. And so that's what we're looking at doing today. Obviously, we can't operate our fairs like we have been operating them, but maybe our future fairs will be different post COVID-19. And I believe honestly that our fairs will play a big role in the recovery of this pandemic as we get back to what the new normal may look like once we come out of this. Many of our fairs, like yours, probably have a vast history, and we've been going back and looking at those years of challenge, whether that's depression or world wars, and looking how the fair manages and what sort of support fairs provide for our cultures. And it's strong. And you look back going, we're a resilient industry. We have a vast history. We have had very trying years. In some cases, the fairs have canceled. In other cases, they have proceeded in different ways. I believe, you know, that our first fair here at the PNE over 110 years ago was designed, just like many other fairs across Canada, to celebrate things like innovation and agriculture, and celebrating and bringing our communities together to create that social fabric. And once we get out of this, our purpose as fairs, it will be what our fairs will look like, I think, will and should be more aligned with our original purpose than they have been for many years. With that said, I just want to thank everyone for jumping on this call. I will try to moderate it as best as I can. There will be a lot of questions, obviously, that we can't answer, but we can parking lot those or keep the dialogue going. We could probably do this again if we feel that's the right call. But with that said, I just want to jump in. As you can see there, we have some topics on here. These are just rough, high-level topics, and we'll go through them in a our benefit or value of this call is the information that gets shared. So if you are comfortable sharing your plans so far, we'd love to hear them. I recognize, as Christina mentioned, that some are still sensitive or confidential. We're not asking you to share those. But if anyone has any brilliant ideas, suggestions, or anything like that that can benefit us, that's what we're here for today. So we would love to hear them. The first thought there is, you know, how are you communicating cancellations if you have been in a situation where you've had to make that incredibly difficult decision to cancel? What are fairs doing, and what do other fairs that have yet to cancel perhaps need to be mindful of as we go down this road?
Great. So I see Amanda's raised her hand, so I'm going to give her a chance to speak up. Amanda, I'm going to unmute you right now. Go ahead.
Great, thanks Christina, and thanks Jeff, and thank you for putting this together. This is a great opportunity for us all to get together and chat. So Amanda Freon from Northlands, we run K-Days, and just to share, so we haven't canceled our event yet, and not to say that we're hoping that we'll still move forward. Of course, we're still waiting for the government to make that decision, and the province and the city. We don't want to make that decision. We want to move forward, and we think it's important. But what we're doing as some contingency planning right now is our team is thinking about, what if we did have to cancel? What does that communication plan look like? So outlining who are all the people that we need to communicate to, and what means are we communicating them to? Have we received deposits? Do we need to send deposits back? Who's the main contact and who's doing that communication? And then what is that message? So I think it's something important that everybody should look at if if it does come to that point. And it's a great piece to have, for whatever reason, for example, you have a tornado or a flood or whatever it might look like, you're going to have to communicate that in the future. So having that background information is key. So yeah, that's what we're looking at right now as our team.
Thanks, Amanda. Yeah, so you're obviously still in the holding pattern like many others. How about any fairs out there that have already had to make that difficult decision? Any things that the rest of us need to be mindful of if, in fact, we're going to that direction?
Great. So I have Catherine Barnsley. Catherine, I'm going to unmute you now, except there we go. Go ahead, Catherine.
Hello, calling from a small fair in eastern Saskatchewan. We made the decision as a board this week to cancel our fair at the end of July, which usually has about 1,000 patrons, 75 horses, 1,000 inside exhibits. Just simply a one-day fair, and I won't take much time because I'm not sure if there are other small fairs on this call. I'm just offering, if you want to communicate with me privately, that I would be glad to send you our rationale, our process, and our press release that went on social media, on our website, so Facebook, website, newspapers, radio, sponsors and donors, and we use the same thing for everyone to keep this simple. And what was really important in the press release, and thank you, Christina, for your help, was to portray a positive message, a caring, compassionate message at first, then thanking our sponsors and donors, giving some historical context of how and why we had to cancel in the 1930s. This is our 113th year. And finally, what we're willing to offer as an alternative, digitally and in person if we can gather later this fall. Our primary reason for canceling at this point is the exhaustion of volunteers who are dealing with so much personal stress in their own lives and in this part of Saskatchewan, harvesting as well as seeding. I will leave it at that. You're welcome to contact me if you wish for how we did this.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Catherine. We appreciate that. I'm sure some of us will reach out to you.
Sorry, Jeff, I have Rob, unless you have a comment.
No, go ahead, Rob.
Perfect, Rob, I'm unmuting you.
Hi guys, good to see everybody and hear again from another wonderful chat line. With regards to the line number 3 there, how you're handling your entertainment and your event contracts and possible potential cancellation. One of the things that I've done with our fair is not till September, but what we've done is in our contracts, we've had one contract signed for a headliner. The other contracts, not only did we write in there of a clause that would be able to not bind us to their contract, but also in the event that the city does allow you to have your fair, but limit the amount of people that are going to be able to come to your fair so that we can make a decision. If for argument's sake, we're allowed to have 1,000 people in the arena for a concert and the city says, well, you can only have 500. If we feel that it's not feasible for us to have 500 and not have the revenue to cover the band, that we have that clause in there as well.
And I think thanks, just to add to that, sorry, Jeff, OAS had a really good call last week about contract clauses. And with that, someone mentioned that COVID-19 is no longer a surprise. It's no longer considered a force majeure, therefore. So a lot of people are now starting to add clause language to include COVID-19 as a factor or component. So as you sign new contracts, whether you're in the fall or later on, I would recommend considering a COVID-19 clause.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point. I'm hearing that as well. Yeah, and we have, as you see there, we've skipped ahead to the entertainment. If there's any other topics on that slide we want to jump to, I'd love to hear your thoughts. There have been a number of conversations on our end about concession deposits. I know other fair organizers have been handling those in a dynamic way or a situational way. And so that is a sensitive topic right now. I know that there are a lot of suppliers out there that are reluctant about putting forward their deposits, given that they're trying to keep their business in a survival mode. So we are working with individuals on this end to help in those general situations. But of course, it is challenging because operate a business, you need to have those deposits. So there's the commitment up front. But of course, it's also challenging when you can't promise what the future will hold in connection with those deposits. So I'd love to hear from other fairs if there's any suggestions on the concession deposits, because I know that that's a very topical one for sure with some of our suppliers on the line as well. If there's anyone that would like to chime in on that, I'd love to hear from you.
While we wait for a hand raise, for those of you on the phone, I'm just going to read from Naomi Murray from Hanover Ag Society. She said, in Roundtable, Manitoba, she says, we have 3 annual events. 2 have been canceled. So they've released a media release, use social media to let the public know. And she's happy to share her press release as well. The main event is in August, and they're speaking with sponsors about allocating their sponsorship to the main event instead. They're being cautiously optimistic, and this will be a celebration of overcoming this pandemic as a community. And then Janine Anderson wrote, I'm with the Preston Valley Fall Fair. She's wondering how other fairs are dealing with sponsors, especially if you don't know whether your event's going to take place or not. So.
Any sponsorship folks out there that would love to give some advice on sponsorship?
Amanda, thank you. I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead.
Hi there. This is not necessarily for us, but some things that I've been seeing in other webinars that people have been talking about is just having those conversations with your sponsors. If you're still in limbo, just keeping in constant communication with them and letting them know that this is what might happen. Talking to them about maybe their sponsorship, if you've got contracts signed, maybe you can extend that contract until 2021. Maybe they can use it as a donation that goes to your foundation. Maybe it goes to whatever it may look like. So just, there's lots of options. Maybe some of them would like to be refunded. So just having the conversations with them to understand if you did have to cancel, what would that look like for them, so that they're in the loop and they know what's going to happen if it does.
Thanks, Amanda. Any other hands up, Christina?
Nope, not at the moment.
Okay. Yeah, sponsorship obviously is a tricky one. It's not my forte specifically here at the P&E, but I can say that I think a lot of us are having those daily conversations with our partners, whether they're sponsors, our banks, just different partners like that, to just keep those individuals close, those companies close, so that when we do fire up the machine, they're there to support us whenever it is that we're able to go. So thank you for that, Amanda. What I think we could probably do is, if there aren't any other questions or suggestions regarding these 5 topics, we have, a question there about advanced sales. If anyone has any practices they'd like to share, suggestions or ideas. Entertainment we've covered off, sponsorship we've covered off a little bit. And then the comms is something that's ongoing, and we've also covered that too. The other side of this, of course, is as we're all planning on what the new normal might look like, there are various pieces that we'll have to put in place, whether it's for small events or large events, on preserving the safety of our guests. I think in this industry, we've been perhaps we're ahead of the game a little bit, given the agriculture side of it, and preserving safety from that perspective to our guests, especially with the petting farms and things like that. But this is being a whole different animal. When we come out of this, fairs are going to need to have protocols in place where mass gatherings are, whether that's ensuring there's social distancing perhaps, or hand sanitizer stations, hand wash stations, you name it. So of course we're turning our heads to that. I'm sure you all are as well. If there's any ideas or suggestions anyone has, we'd love to hear from you on that as well.
Just before we get to that, Rob's raised his hand, so I'm going to unmute you, Rob. Go ahead.
With regards to the sponsors, just to touch on that for a minute, what we've told our board, again, our fair is not till September. What we've told our board is not to sort of reach out to their sponsors at this given time, and so that we can at least see what's happening and what's going on. I mean, it is most certainly going to be very difficult for some of the local businesses that have been shut down to be able to go back to them in a month or 2 months from now and ask them for their financial contribution to the fair. So, I mean, we're monitoring it and we're looking at it, but we've just told everybody to stay away from their sponsors and that right now. The other thing I just wanted to ask, and I think the only person that I see on the list there that may be from my area, in the Ottawa area in District 1, is Liz, but we have our board meeting tonight, and one of the things that I'm going to be putting forward or putting out for discussion on our Zoom board meeting tonight is the possibility, because we're all a family, all the fairs are family, and we all try to work with each other, is to see the idea, and then that's what I'm asking, has anybody ever thought of this, is the idea of, for instance, if a fair in around my area has already canceled, is to combine fairs, so that when September comes for my fair, instead of just being the Richmond Fair, it could be ABC and CDF Fair as well, and combining the fairs together to try to help each other out. So each evening of your fair could possibly be another fair's revenue or support. Has anybody thought of that, or has that ever come up? Or I know it's pretty far-fetched, but being a Newfoundlander, we always think outside of a box, buddy.
I've heard of a few fairs talking about it. I haven't heard of any that have actually done it yet, though, or plan to do it.
Yeah, Rob, I think it's a great idea, and thank you for throwing it out there. And I'm sure individuals can think about that. In our region here, there are other large events, obviously, that aren't happening in the summer months here in Vancouver right now, or even in the spring. And so there could be a possibility, if this fair were to go forward, to have components of other events perhaps activate on site during those fairs, so that people can get a taste of that event that they weren't able to get beforehand. It's also a way of supporting other events in the industry, but those are all just good ideas right now that we're considering, of course, because the goalposts are moving on a daily basis. But I also know, in speaking to some of you, specifically the fair organizers, that the decision came to a point where you had to either postpone or just cancel altogether. And a lot of fairs were looking at potentially postponing or dragging, and then they would realize that they're butting up against other fairs or other events, and creating competition, or perhaps and they didn't want to step on other people's toes. So some fairs I know have just said, look, we can't really move because we don't want to create hardship for another fair within the industry or another partner down the road that's, you know, always had their event in October, and ours has always been in July. So we'll let them do theirs as opposed to trying to compete with them as well. So all good ideas, definitely. Unfortunately, yeah, well, we'll just have to wait and see how that all plans out. There were a couple comments there, Christine. I'll throw it to you if you want to jump on those.
Perfect, thanks. I was actually going to say the same thing. So some people, just in a broader sense, I guess, are asking about the provincial landscape and national landscape. So Janine mentioned, is anyone getting funding from their PC Gaming or provincial funds? That is very, Cafe can't speak to that. I would say reach out to your provincial association. I do know through press releases and our connections that, for example, Alberta Ag Societies was able to secure their regular funding at this time, but they are looking for additional funding depending on how the season goes. So it really does vary from province to province. I know we have some provincial reps on the call too, so feel free, provincial reps to either type in or raise your hand and let us know about that. And Robert asked, is there a sense nationally of what's happening with changes to mass gatherings? And he noted that Quebec has canceled festivals through to August. And that is true. Quebec, the government asked last week that all festivals and fairs specifically cancel their events. And so they have been canceled. That pretty much for Quebec has cut off the entire fair season. There are no other, that I know of at this moment, there are no other provinces that have taken that action of canceling all their mass gatherings. It's not to say it won't happen. Others are, it really is again provincial, so it depends. Some have until May 30th, no gatherings until June 30th. So we're really creeping into later and later in the season. Again, reach out to your provincial rep for more information. They know about that. We also are tracking it carefully, but it changes so fast. So we don't know what it's going to look like. We also know that mass gatherings probably are going to be considered one of the higher risk locations. And so it might take longer to get up to full capacity, but there's no sense of what that can look like at this time. Lisa from Lethbridge Exhibition Park said 7 annual events have been, 2 of 7 annual events have been canceled, and they contacted all the exhibitors individually, sent out a press release, and canceled the events on Facebook. So they're looking at starting the farmers market, their farmers market, in about a month's time. And then Liz, I don't know, Rob, if you saw this, but Liz said they're working on a District 1 meeting on the 25th, so that's a good suggestion for them. So I think I'm caught up on comments there. Jeff, do you want me to go to the next slide?
Yeah, sure. Well, as you do that, I'll just expand on Lisa. Thanks for that comment, Lisa, from Lethbridge. One thing that we have been continuing here at Hastings Park is the farmers markets. For whatever they're deemed as an essential service in this region. So we've been managing those on our site every Sunday for, well, since this all began. And if you wanted to reach out, I can explain to you what sort of protocols and safeguards we have in place and perhaps how they receive that essential service designation. But from our perspective, working with the Vancouver Coastal Health folks here, we've been able to maintain our farmers markets operations, obviously with a lot of restrictions, but they have been moving forward. That's the only event we've been able to do. Okay, yeah, thanks, Christina. Just shifting gears for a second, how are, I have to move this window here. How are you assessing risk for upcoming events? What sort of things are you looking at, even once we get through this? If there are any ideas, suggestions, or comments about risk assessment moving forward and things that you think our industry should be focusing on, or other things that are worrying you and that you have questions that perhaps some of us can help you with.
So while I wait for a few hands to go up, just as a little bit of sense, everyone has different protocols and procedures, but also I've seen some ideas of fairs, for example, in the United States, their season starts earlier, and certainly have had to cancel a lot of their fairs. But for example, there's one, and I can't remember the name of it right now, they decided the risk was too high to run the whole fair, and they may have been stopped by their governor even, but they've done a drive-through food truck layout on their grounds instead. So you can go pick up food and try the crazy new fair foods, and you don't have to get out of your car. And so that's a lower risk activity that they've chosen to do. Janine has said our farmers market partners with our fair on the Saturday, so I'm not sure how things progress. And I think that it's all about having the conversations.
Love that idea. Drive-through food truck, fair food. Get the taste of the fair without going to the fair. Yeah, exactly. It would obviously support, you know, our suppliers and partners as well, giving them an opportunity to activate in a lesser degree, albeit, but something's better than nothing, I guess.
Amanda just added to that. She said that was in Florida, and she heard they made $240,000 last weekend.
Wow.
So it's better than nothing. It's pretty decent. I'm not seeing any hands raised or other comments on this. Oh, actually, sorry. Ann McDonald says, with respect to health risks, I believe we will have to follow guidance of our respective health authorities for any upcoming events. There are lots of related risks, of course, financial, reputational, et cetera, et cetera. Yep.
Okay. Good question, Janine.
Yeah. Is anyone considering a virtual fair? We've seen a few examples in the States already, and if you're interested in seeing those links, feel free to send me an email. I can show you what they're doing. There's been virtual auctions as well, animal auctions and things like that. Jeff, have you seen anything?
Nothing that I can speak to. I imagine there's virtual components of some fairs that may be easier than others, but yeah, we were having the same conversation here about 4-H and the auction and how that would happen, or other types of auctions or fundraising that we do. If there's any virtual ideas or things that people are working on, we'd love to hear them.
And Barb says, Curtis and Miller Rail Fair are considering doing this for some of their bench departments. Robert says, the idea has been raised, would love to know what other fairs are doing elsewhere. Maybe this might even warrant its own, I'll make note, it might warrant its own session to talk about virtual fairs and how that could be run and technology used and things like that as well. It was Clay County Fair, I believe, that did a virtual fair. Folks want to look it up and get a sense of it. And like I said, we can see about doing a session.
Okay. Sounds like a good topic for me.
Okay, so Mike has a question. How do you include social distancing during our fair? Anyone have ideas about that? Sorry.
No, go ahead. No, thank you.
I see, and then Janine says, anyone think masks might be mandatory for large gatherings? I can tell you, well, and from what I see in Quebec, mass gatherings, of course, are not allowed right now, but for certainly everyone is seeing plexiglass at the grocery stores. You wash your hands before you go in and all sorts of things. You see them cleaning a lot more. And I think, like Jeff mentioned earlier, we're going to see a lot of those same sort of moves, maybe not plexiglass, because we're a bit more interactive than that, but more hand sanitizing stations and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. To the distancing question, I think Mike, you had a good one there. Obviously, in parks and other areas right now within our regions, there's the 2 meters that people are mandated to follow. How do you mandate a 2-meter distance during a fair? My perspective is that's simply not possible, with the fairs and the size of the fairs that we have, especially on those busy days, but nothing's impossible. So it's a good question. I think that we're all considering at this point is how do you mitigate your risk? How do you employ new protocols and guidelines for guests when they do come to your event, while also not hindering the event or impacting the guest experience to the point where it's not worth it? So that is a really good question. I think we're all wrestling with right now.
I have Amanda with her hand raised, and then Mike. So Amanda, I'll unmute you first. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I was just noting, so grocery stores in Alberta are limiting the number of people able to go in. Of course, they're saying, keep your six feet distance, your 2 meters, but limiting. So that might be something that we have to look at. If we're going into mass gatherings, they might only allow, throughout the summer, 1,000 or 500 up to maybe 10,000. So if you're allowed to have 10,000, some of the smaller fairs can easily have no problem with it. But if you're looking at, a couple 100,000, you might not be able to run. But thinking about, if the grocery stores are doing that, or maybe creating walkways where everybody has to follow the same path. So, in your exhibits area, you have to go down this one way and everybody follows the same route, just like in the grocery stores. So that's something to think about, maybe.
I'm almost envisioning now like a VIP, you buy your VIP tickets for a certain window sort of thing, and it creates mass demand because there's only limited slots or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mike, I'm going to unmute you now. Go right ahead.
Hi, I'm Mike from the Cloverdale Rodeo. A couple of things that are going on with the really big organizations. Disney is talking about when they reopen, they're going to do temperature checks for everybody who goes in to give a sense of safety. And they're also talking about masking everyone who goes in. So that limits your 6 feet. You don't have to worry as much about your 6 feet. So those are a couple of options that you can do as well. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
good point, Mike. I think, yeah, that's a really good point. As we look to Asia specifically, where they started with the storm and now they're coming out of it quicker than the rest of us, or earlier than the rest of us, I should say. The theme park industry is also something that we should be looking at, because obviously mass gatherings is their thing as well. And theme parks are very popular in China and places throughout Asia. So what protocols these big companies like the Disneys and the Universals and other large theme parks across the world are doing will be probably measures that we'll want to be looking at as well. So thanks for that, Mike.
Should we move to the next slide, maybe?
Sounds like a good call.
Awesome. Okay. Of course, I have trouble doing that. So the question is, how are you keeping staff, board, volunteers engaged?
I can maybe start. This has been a difficult one for us at the PNE. Obviously, we have we have a seasonal amusement park that runs that would have been open at the end of April through May, and like many of the other fairs across Canada, there are a series of events that happen all the time on our sites that we either manage or produce ourselves. And so just like many organizations, we do have a number of employees that are on layoff right now or furloughed. And so they're, of course, looking for answers, looking for updates. And that is one thing that we are asking ourselves right now on this end is, what is our communication strategy to keep those individuals who are on the sidelines engaged, hopeful, and supportive, whether they're volunteers or paid. We have a lot of people that are looking for a lot of answers right now, and suppliers and partners as well. So I don't have the answer. We're certainly not the best fair in the country right now for our communication on how we communicate with individuals. We're doing that individually with folks and with different departments and groups, but we do recognize, of course, like you all do, I'm sure as well, that just keeping people close is critical at this point in time, and making sure that we are communicating with our staff, our volunteers, our partners, with whatever information it is that we have. Unfortunately, we don't have new information all the time, but I think it's important that we continue to keep those streams open, and this be no different. Is a good example of, at the very least, we can put an effort to keep those communication streams open so that we are having supporting each other, and we can make better decisions in real time if the information is there and flowing properly.
So Mike Bokey says, I email my board with updates almost daily. We keep our website and Facebook current in terms of keeping people engaged as well. I also email my board daily too. They're not sick of it yet, they say, but it's about providing relevant information. I've also seen some people say, in terms of social distancing, you can have someone invite people to paint a fence or fix up things where they don't have to do it in a team, but they can still help out, right? So those are some ideas too. Some of the repairs you've been wanting to do on your grounds. People are bored. They might even do it just for the heck of it. Anne McDonald said, in the shorter term, say this summer or this year, I believe that the negative financial impact the pandemic has had on people's incomes means they won't have any discretionary funds to spend on the fair. Thoughts on that? On that note, we have people asking how many Facebook posts a week. As well as people are holding bi-weekly webinars, having loose discussions, checking in on the phone, sort of thing. So there's a lot of different things you can do to continually engage people, I would say. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. And then Mitchell Lefebvre says, Mitchell from Expo Ormstown, Quebec. As you are all aware, government has stopped all fairs and ag-related events. We're going to have a new event at the beginning of the fall. We haven't made any announcement yet about this. But what do you think is the best way to go about this? Thoughts there, Jeff? Do you have any thoughts?
So the last one there on the social media?
From Mitchell Lefebvre.
Let me just
from Ormstown, Quebec. asking about creating a new event and in the fall and how to go about this.
Yeah, looking at Quebec, which may be similar to every province, at some point, I think we will need to have these coming out parties, whatever they look like. And our industry, and this is just my opinion, so take it for what it's worth, will play a big role in that. And hopefully the timing works for some of our fairs where they just naturally occur at the same time. But someone made the comment just a minute ago saying that people feel like they need to get out and get through this. Obviously, we need to be responsible and wait for the right time to do that. But with Joanne there, yeah, I think there's this pent up demand to get out and to celebrate. But there was also the other comment about the economy and discretional spending, and will families be able to afford to get out? And that's a question we won't really be able to answer until we get the industry back online. And it may, have a different effect in different regions, but looking at fairs through times of depression and other things, we have done sometimes incredibly well, in 2008, 2009 as an industry, or in some fairs have and others haven't. So I think a lot of it has to do with regionally where we sit, what the economy looks like in our regions, and how we're impacted by the economy. But there's also the school of thought that if the economy is suffering and families aren't spending a lot of money on travel or going off camping or doing other expensive activities in the summer, the fair does provide, whenever that fair is, a relatively inexpensive experience that can take up a whole day for families to go have an enjoyable time for everyone on there. So you can look at it through the lens of, yeah, it costs money to go to the fair, and you can spend actually a lot of money at the fair if you choose to. But we all battle this, I think, in our marketing of come out to the fair, you can have a great time. Sure, you can spend a lot of money if you buy everything, but it's actually really affordable, great family entertainment. And I'm hoping the latter is what people will view when they do think about coming to our fairs once this is passed. Yeah.
We've had a few people comment about social media and engagement as well. And so recommendations of 3 to 4 posts a week. And have fun with it. So talk about social distancing. I think this was Saanich Fair said, use farm animals for effect. So move over, social distance. So there's a lot of ways to engage. I've also heard of people, and someone else mentioned this as well, engaging with your sponsors or your community. So your municipality might not have the same traction on social media that you do. So reach out to them and see if you can help them get their messages out. And then you're doing a public service as well and helping the community. So there's a lot of different ways that you can engage the community. Mike Vokey says we're looking at financial risk, and there's more financial risk for a failed fair than there is with canceling the fair. That's a very good point. And Anne says always look good to look at the silver lining.
Absolutely, Anne. I think it's all we can do at this point.
And I think too, one of the webinars I've just booked today for the upcoming weeks, you'll see it posted soon, is a session specifically about online engagement and building your brand, which is applicable right now, but also throughout post-pandemic as well. A lot of us will post for a month, 2 months before our fair or event really heavily, and then during the event, and then we disappear for 10 months. So how can you keep that momentum going? What other posts can you have and things like that? And so stay tuned for information there. Shall we go to the next slide? I think we're almost done with our public questions, and then maybe open it up to the floor.
Anne has a question, a good point there too.
Thanks.
We did a Thank a Farmer essential service coloring contest to help with activities for stay-at-home kids. I think that's a brilliant idea. Obviously, farmers and food producers being essential right now, and working and running off their feet so the rest of us can stay at home is something that is a very tight connection to our industry as well. So I think that's a brilliant idea. Thank you for sharing that, Anne. Next question. Yeah, thanks, Christina. What ideas do you have to mitigate the impact of your organization? A lot of us are coming up with very creative revenue ideas, some good, some not so good. But I'm sure with all your organizations, many of you are spitballing a bunch of different crazy ideas to see what sticks. So if there are any revenue ideas that you have that you would like to share, we'd love to hear them. Or any questions or things that you're even speculating, if you'd like to share them, we'd love to hear them as well.
A reminder again, you guys can raise your hand if you want to speak up. That's on the participant box. When you open it up, I feel it's a lot of Jeff and I talking. I feel bad. And while we wait for some people, here's a crazy, wacky idea I was thinking of, which I fully admit is a terrible idea. But if you can't have people gather together, maybe doing subscription boxes. And so people could subscribe, and every month they get like your fair pin and maybe candy corn, and then next month they get a hat and a stuffed animal or something like that. So now that I've pitched that idea, you can't do any worse. So feel free to share some of the ideas you're thinking about, like we mentioned the food truck drive-through before.
Yeah, another bad idea brainstorm that we're working on here. And again, the details and the logistics to be determined, but we're even thinking about one of our, in the amusement park and even throughout the fair, we do a lot of business of birthday parties. And so we're looking at creative ways of allowing families to celebrate their fair or their P&E themed birthday party at home. And maybe that's a package that you can sign up for, and we'll deliver you, some of our iconic mini donuts or cotton candy and some other swag to have your birthday party at home. That obviously isn't the same as having it at the park, but maybe we can bring a little bit of the park to your house for the kids that are cooped up having a birthday party. Something that we're just exploring at this time.
I think we see a lot of business. Every business is pivoting right now. And pivot is the trigger word. So how can you pivot? Naomi says, our board members are taking this slow time to build relationships with sponsors. The stronger those relations are, the more likely they are to keep their dollars with the fair during the season. So for example, one sponsor had a devastating fire at their location. We created a care package and did a safe drop-off. They decided to keep their funds with us this year. Kind gestures and personal relationships with sponsors will keep the bond strong through this pandemic.
Absolutely.
Catherine's wondering if anyone's doing an online silent auction. They're dependent on their silent auction at their now canceled fair for agricultural scholarships. So has anyone looked into online auctions? I would say a great place to maybe look, well, if you haven't already, is 4-H has an online auction, and it's different. It's different merchandise and stuff like that. But 4-H Canada does it every year, so it has some really good resources and layouts. I would also say with that sort of stuff too, the promotion is really important in getting the word out. So encouraging people to share it, even if they're not going to bid on stuff, is going to make a big difference. Mm-hmm. Rob Petton says, the largest St. Patty Day that never happened. Social distance, dance, girls on side, boys on the other, social events for all local business.
Yeah. Yeah, the online auction, I would be interested to hear if anyone has any experience with that previously. I believe some fairs will have an online component leading up to their fair or during their fair to cater to those that perhaps can't get out to the fair that may still want to auction on, whether it's silent auction pricing or even livestock or things like that. But I can say here at the P&E, we do all our auctioning on site. So I don't really have any solutions that I'm aware of that we have been using specifically, but other fairs I think are doing that. So if anyone had any platforms or suggestions on how to answer that question for Catherine on silent auctions, I'm sure her and the rest of us would love to hear it.
Maybe before we go to the last slide, because that's more of an internal thing, you can open the floor to questions. So again, feel free to raise your hand or type in the chat box for questions or ideas. And in the meantime, I have Lisa, who said our local radio stations do online auctions, so she can reach out to her contacts to see how to do it. So thank you very much, Lisa. That would be really great. If you can send that information, well, to Catherine for sure, but if you can send it to me too, I can share it with folks as well.
Okay.
So Catherine says the fair has a huge homemade pie booth. They plan to bake pies as usual and sell them online through the auction. Tie this to the pie competition inside exhibits, make it mock competitive and raise money too, for sure. Well, I think too, actually, that's a good point for your exhibits. A lot of your exhibits are also visual, so you can do an online, post everyone's entries on Facebook and have a People's Choice contest or something like that. And that's another way to engage and keep things going and get people, I mean, we all know people are bored, so there's a lot of quilters right now, and there's a lot of knitters and knitting happening. I'm fearful for the amount of knit stuff my mother is going to give me after this. So that's a good way to engage as well.
Yeah, I can see a lot of fairs having a bread making competition after this for sure, based on what I've seen online. Okay. If there are no other questions, we're getting close to the hour anyway. Why don't we just go through that last slide, Christina, on what about Cafe?
Yeah, sure. So what can Cafe do for you? So that's the other thing we wanted to get out of this call. Weekly webinars, topical webinars. We found out that some of the topical ones are important, so we're doing that. Government relations, online discussion. Do you want to see some templates for making decisions, or do you have any other ideas? So speak now. Now's not the only time you have to speak, of course. If you have other ideas, feel free to reach out to me at any time. I'm having some really good conversations with people in the industry about how we can help out, and so hopefully we'll have more information that way. We are advocating for you guys federally. Someone has asked that they do want templates, so that's awesome. We are working on a couple of those too, but if there's any specific templates you would like to see, feel free to let us know as well. We have, I would say our greatest strength is our network. And so there's a lot of us who don't have templates or resources, but the idea Cafe has is to take the best practices from those who have those templates and develop them into something for you guys to use as well, because this is something a lot of us haven't faced. And we're looking for some answers, and we're looking for how to make decisions and all sorts of stuff. So certainly templates, I think that's a good point. We can definitely do that. Any other suggestions? Anything else you want to see Cafe doing? At the same time, I see Janine asked, what is the deadline for fairs to print their fair books? I think OAS brought this up last week as well. I believe it was last week, and a lot of them have changed their deadlines or decided to go, even if they're still having their event, they've decided to go online only to cut the cost, but also have it available. So again, I think the deadlines are variable, but consider going online for this year maybe as well.
Yeah, we're exploring that right now as well, whether that's through our app or just having online messaging versus printing. And Yvonne has just mentioned at the IPE, they're going to print right now, very small quantity printed this year, online for all of their entries. Yeah, so proceeding safely.
Yeah, that's a fair point. People have to usually go pick up the books. Where are they going to pick it up? I know back in the day, we used to mail them out to past exhibitors. And so if you're still doing something like that, you could do it. But again, if you're worried about whether your event's going to run or not, mailing is expensive, especially when you're talking about those fair books. So certainly need to weigh the pros and cons there.
Okay, well, I think that's bringing things to a close. At the very least, as I said at the beginning, it's about making connections. So if there's someone who you want to reach out to, perhaps someone who you haven't even met yet, you want their contact information, feel free to reach out to Christina. We can make those connections. If you have any other ideas or questions, this network is a strong network that can work together, and we hope that will happen coming out of this. If there's any questions I can help with, by all means, feel free to reach out to me, anyone. If you want to compare notes or compare bad idea brainstorms, or just share in the misery of whatever it is you're facing, I'm happy to chat with any of you folks as well.
And I think just to add to that too, please keep us informed of anything you see going on online, around the world, what Disney's doing, whatever, because just like you, were looking to those options as well. And we can start sharing that information with everyone too. Just again, bad idea brainstorm, good idea brainstorm. I like bad idea brainstorm. I really like that. That's our next session title.
Absolutely. Okay, well, obviously it's a very difficult time. We can't understate that. So, be safe, everyone. Thank you for participating today. We will all get through this on the other end. And I do believe, honestly, as I said earlier, that the fair plays a big role in helping pull our cultures out of this. And so when that's time for that to happen, I look forward to fairs across this country doing incredibly well. And hopefully that's a lot sooner than later. So thank you, everyone, for all that. And we'll continue to do this as needed. But look forward to better times ahead. And I think they're hopefully a lot quicker than we are thinking right now. So be positive, be safe, and we'll be here ready to put on some fantastic fairs when the time comes.
And just a quick thanks to you, Jeff, for moderating. You did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Have a good day, everyone.
Yeah, you too.